reintroduction of who I am. I'm an educator. I'm an author. I'm a public speaker. I'm a philosopher. But I spent most of my life as an intelligence analyst with a number of the 3-letter agencies. Either I worked for them or with them. So in looking at what is my focus, and you'll notice on my different platforms, I kind of spread them out just a bit. My work focuses on critical thinking, on metacognition, on intelligence analysis, decision-making under uncertainty. I help leaders, students, professionals see problems clearly, challenge their assumptions, and make better judgments when the stakes are high. I develop sharper thinkers and more disciplined decision makers. That's, in a nutshell, my purpose for you all to know. Now, I know that, I am in a time in my life. I worked very hard for 35 plus years. I can now sit back. I can read. I can research. Yes, I'm still a practitioner academic. I'm a scholar. It's not all about titles and positions. It is where I choose to focus, and where I focus on a daily basis for hours is reading and research, and then prolifically write. Now, you've also seen, and I've had my detractors, and I have thick skin. Everybody has, their judgments they want to make. We are living in a technological age that we have tools. I have 5 screens just living in front of me. I have 2 more on the side. Because yes, I am a scholar. I am a researcher. I am a reader. And one can just look at, my library of books and see that, yes, I pull them off the shelf every day. But that doesn't mean that that's where it all lies. We have volumes of information at our fingertips in which to use. And I am one that I use it. I use it to my advantage. I want to be able to, because I see it. I attend conferences. I talk to colleagues. I talk to students on a daily basis, and I observe. And of what I also look back in hindsight of what I observed through my almost 4 decades. If you look at it now, almost 4 decades of doing intelligence analysis. If you want to go, well, even looking back at my college days before becoming an intelligence analyst, that I wasn't taught how to think critically, or let alone what is critical thinking. We use buzzwords like, okay, critical thinking, that's to grab something, at least it puts it in a category. But what we don't do is we don't talk enough as academics, as educators, as students. We don't take upon the initiative ourselves to want to learn more. We have to have it shoved down our throats. But no one ever talks about metacognition. That's the thinking about thinking, your own thinking about thinking, and understanding what you know and what you don't know. I've met so many people who believe that they are smart. And in our own right, we are all smart. But are they educated? And I'm talking well beyond the degree. You can have an advanced degree with multiple letters after your name. You can have all the certifications, but that doesn't make you an intellectual. That means, yes, you went through a core body of work. I have taught doctoral studies. I have gone through and I've been a chair on doctoral committees. I've been subject matter experts. I've been a committee member. And it comes up all the time that when we talk about assumptions and framing and argumentation and fallacies, students and even practitioners are at times are completely lost. And that's because they don't know. What are you doing about it yourself? If you're going, wow, I haven't really looked at the logic and the rhetoric of what is argumentation. What is intellectual humility? Well, it's knowing what we don't know and willing to take responsibility and accountability for ourselves to go do more. As professionals, as academics, this should be one of the first things that we do. I got to say that within only the last 10 years, did I have that epiphany. And even more so in the last 2 to 3 years when I started writing I had tons of book ideas in various states of play. And it's only been in the last 1.5 to 2 years that I have dedicated numerous hours to sitting here in front of my computer and writing and researching, get my thoughts down, even to the point of, yes, my own philosophical framework, which will be coming out soon, by the way, being published. It's been a decade or more of my thoughts, my concerns, my questions. And this is where I go back to the use of technology and the elephant in the room of AI. Well, yes, of course, use it. It's a tool. It has acted as a graduate, if not more than a graduate, because it's at the PhD level now that I can say, I have my agents working, my agentic AI agents that I've been able to set up and say, I need you to research deeply, get obscure, scholarly, peer-reviewed works. Find me information that isn't just out there in the face of everybody, because my thoughts and my concerns, my ideas and perspectives are something that I want to give to the world. And of course, not enough people read. And you'll see that in my works. I talk about reading at an early age, reading as an adult. We don't do enough. Studying, looking at philosophy, just pick up a philosophy book. Doesn't matter who or what. There are the disagreeers. There are individual, academics who say, well, ancient philosophy shouldn't be where people start. Well, I disagree. I think anywhere that somebody could start with a philosophy and understanding that what they don't understand. I mean, you got to think understanding philosophy is really just a community of inquiry. It's all about questioning. And it doesn't matter what they're questioning. It's there to teach you to question more, even if it's just of yourself. So I plead and I beg with my colleagues in higher education that don't say or you're an expert at critical thinking. One cannot be an expert. I will fight that always. No one can be an expert, especially in critical thinking. We are learners of critical thinking. Do we take the time to read every single paper that a doctoral student turns in and pick it apart for everything from its bias, its assumptions, its fallacies? No. I don't know how many colleagues of mine that I would say, my gosh, you're missing the opportunity. You're putting your name on this individual's published works, and you're not dissecting this individual's work like a scholar. You have a PhD or you have a doctorate, an applied doctorate. And especially those in the intelligence community who say, well, I'm an intelligence expert. Well, no, you're not. You might have a subject matter expertise in a area that is something that not everybody looks at. I say this as a thought-provoking message, as well as an invitation to start talking to one another. Like I said, I've had my naysayers who, it's funny that they won't post publicly on my Substack, my Medium, my LinkedIn, blogs within international associations that I attend. And yet they themselves call them a critical thinking expert. And I look at the diatribe of information that they provide. It's thin at best. I attended conferences recently over the last, well, I've attended in the last 6 months alone, I've attended 4 or 5 conferences where I do talk on critical thinking towards national security, counterterrorism, crime analysis. And I meet people that they want to talk critical thinking, but they don't know how to and yet they call themselves subject matter experts, but they don't know the first way to have a conversation with an individual. So let me ask you, and I love the feedback that people give me. I do. I love the kind words that gives me support, and I always try to return that. But I would never be afraid to say, maybe you're off base. Have you thought about X, Y, or Z? If I were to have been so inclined to do so. But I see all these people writing on critical thinking, but they don't think about the philosophical aspect. Why do we not tell our students, even in an intelligence course, that we're talking about how to write with intelligence, how to think critically on intelligence analysis, and yet we give structured analytical techniques? I mean, Hauer and Fearson wrote, prolifically on structured analytical techniques based on their time with the CIA, and Hauer even, wrote, who wasn't a psychologist, but wrote the quintessential psychology of intelligence analysis, which to this day I stand behind, that it is truly one of the foundational works. But then there's also the individuals who say, well, intelligence analysis lacks theory, but I'm here to prove that. I'm putting out that theory every day. And it's an interesting journey. And that's the reason I write prolifically on Substack and Medium, and I write my own books, because I feel that when it comes to journals, well, they a lot of them, and I've been turned down a lot. We've all been turned. Yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you. I have Miss Ferris. That the signal. I read the intelligence that you come out with, and it's absolutely amazing. But having journals say, well, this just isn't our niche. Yeah, I get the feeling after talking to a couple of colleagues who sit on editorial boards, and of course are within the realm of where I've submitted publications, and I've asked, what is it that I get turned down for? And they're like, well, you're way up here. The readership is down here. And I find that truly sad. That as individuals, that we are professionals, we're academics, we're, professional academics. That we're not pushing ourselves and we're not pushing others to be more educated. Look at our world. We are surrounded by uneducated individuals. I'm not the bourgeois. I don't have the ego that I'm smarter than everybody else. And I'm not saying that you too have that feeling. But if we're not pushing others, and I'm not saying I'm not judgy if you mean that, or if, but yes, we're surrounded by complete idiots. I mean, really, truly, honestly, you look at the news, you look at and we're guided only by politicians who, to me, don't have a brain. Yes, they're lawyers and they're attorneys, right? They're professionals here in the United States. Well, they're professional con artists, they're professional manipulators. They have nothing else. I mean, you listen to the arguments. Yes, exactly. We see what's going on around us and we see this world crumbling. And again, I completely agree. Like, this is the reason that since I think I started in April or May of last year, my account with Substack, of just trying to get what I feel we're lacking. I mean, I've been a high school teacher in the last 5 years. Of course, I've been a faculty educator for the last 15, 17 years now. And we look at what this world, so I've seen these 14, 15-year-olds and I've seen 60-year-olds who can't think their way out of a paper bag. Go into my Substack and take a look at that article. Because I want to call people out. Because we're allowing individuals who we are in charge of, and this goes to not only my colleagues and faculty, but everything from deans and provosts and presidents of universities. Stop trying to dumb things down and make the analytical rigor of what it once was. Where are the philosophy courses to get students to think of different perspectives, to do actual analysis? Remember, AI can't do the analysis for us. Maybe someday in the future, it would actually have that humanistic thinking. Everything is generalistic. And that's great for what we write as, like myself, as philosopher, academics, scholars, right? But why aren't we doing this within, say, the service academies, the intelligence community colleges? I mean, again, I've gone to several conferences where I've met individuals from national universities, military universities, and they talk a good game, and I'm calling them out. You talk a good game on critical thinking, but when it comes to having a conversation with another philosopher on critical thinking, I found individuals, I literally had somebody come up to me and want to talk. And this is the kind of the scenario of this, right after one of my talks, and ask, oh my gosh, you did a great critical thinking, safeguarding analytical integrity based off, of course, one of my publications, my second book, in that same name. And so what are you working on? And I said, well, I'm glad that you asked. It's very interesting that you approach me with this, because boy, do I have, if you haven't checked out my Substack, I really am about wanting to do more critical thinking. And for the academics, what we're doing wrong as educators, as analysts, as human beings, the intellectual humility that we lack, and wanting to say, you know what, I want to do better. I said, I've written, I'm almost done. I've been writing for the last decade or so, my own philosophical framework. And in doing so, I hadn't even spit out the name of my philosophy and watched the individual look at their watch. And I was like, one, you didn't really want to come talk to me and give me a compliment and actually have a conversation. You just wanted to pass by niceties in a place that we should have sat down and said, well, here's you asked, what made you do this? What's going on? But then you look at your watch. I literally just dropped it, turned away, and walked off because I'm not going to be disrespected in that. And that's not ego. That was just, I read the room that you didn't want to actually have a conversation as an educator. Um, I, I totally agree that in the chat, it's maybe these nuts should be engaging with the population like you, helping them and our country think better. Yes, and you found me, and I found you, and yes, the work is important, and that's the reason I don't give up. And I kind of doubled down on it, and that's the reason. Like today, I just wanted to do a quick live one on having this real conversation of I learn every day in my research. I ask AI and what, because I have the conversations. It's to the point of Jarvis now, if you're from Iron Man, that you can have conversations that something that is near and dear to my heart, as well as is, of course, counterterrorism. And I know I don't write enough on counterterrorism issues. The counterterrorism and the intelligence assessment recently came out earlier this year. And I find the unclassified versions absolutely boring. They do nothing but give what they're supposed to the general public of, see, this is what we're doing. To me, it's all theater, just like the politics. It's all theater. People get upset that FBI Director Kash Patel fired agents and analysts who took part in such things as, the memo identifying surveillance on Catholics and homeschoolings, and then the J6. And I am a conspiracy theorist because I want that. If someone says, hey, you got to look at this, it's worth looking at, because that's an alternative perspective. That means it's not necessarily something in foundational knowledge. We haven't gotten to the root of it. I mean, you look at what ODNI, Tulsi Gabbard released last week about COVID origins and the biolabs in the Ukraine during that same time. And then we look at that. Look how many politicians and IC individuals told us that doesn't exist. That's a conspiracy. That's rumor. No, to find out that now it is true. Your own government lied to you. This is why we need critical thinking, because we have people who drink the Kool-Aid. And I don't care if you're left or you're right. I'm neither. I want to look at information that has empirical, foundational, that I can really go, okay, this really happened. There's a difference between truth and fact. And going back to Kash Patel, that he fired, and that I've seen even associations I belong with that get really upset that, oh, well, this is all political. Well, darn right it's political. And this goes back to, again, my second book, Safeguarding Analytical Integrity. We feel, we believe, and these are emotional words. And I even talked with Kathy Fearson after we were all on a panel, on author panel. And she said, well, analysts should be apolitical. Yes, they should, but they're not. We don't do polygraphs to say, when you are going to be looking at information, are you going to be looking at it through the lens of your political viewpoints? Oh, that's a loaded question. You can't ask that. I'm saying this rhetorically. Well, yeah, you should be. We should be asking that. I've worked with so many individuals within the FBI, the CIA, the military, that have looked at things through the lens of a political ideology. And that is where we hurt. And then when you take it to the next level of an advanced degree at any of these universities, whether it's within the IC or outside that teach intelligence analysis, we don't teach about, we teach about bias, confirmation bias. It's the buzzword. It's the stuff that people think, but no, they actually go in and go, you need to be looking at your own bias. And if you're thinking from the left or from the right, then you're wrong and you shouldn't be. And we see that now more than ever. So I applaud FBI director for doing that. Not because what we saw in these, and again, some of this stuff actually was in my book, that date of cutoff date was October 31st of 2025. So anything found out afterwards was not in that book. But I think that I hit the nail on the head when I kind of came into that every single presidency has utilized the intelligence community as a political weapon. Yes, we've talked about politicalization being weaponized or weaponized politicalization. But what we don't talk about in the open is that do we have the analytical rigor that should be going along with all this analysis? That's why I think, AI usage is good within the IC, because especially if it's when we look at the sycophancy of AI, we can actually teach it to be non-biased. And if you notice, yes, within mine, I make sure that I don't do any kind of framing. I don't do any bias. I make sure that I look at my fallacies of argumentation. I question everything I write, and I'm not saying it's perfect. That's why I take into account individuals who do write me back. So I know I've gone on for 25 minutes, but this is something that I just wanted to be able to get out there and get your thoughts. I do appreciate the individuals who have, really come in and chimed in. Tina Raman, who as a coach, a critical thinking coach, I love the articles that you have. I follow you. I read the stuff. The next thing, and let me finish up about the counterterrorism. The next one is talking about, when the individuals who write the counterterrorism strategies throughout the IC, I see a very much a lack, especially National Counterterrorism Center. I see the lack of philosophical framework. Um, you know, should we be looking at it through a St. Augustine? Should we be looking at through Machiavellian lens? Now, whereas war is okay, even in the eyes of religious backgrounds, Christianity backgrounds. But then, when you look at it from the Machiavellian, how does the state ward off or fight to stay in power? And I use that loosely of maybe if you understand, the Art of War that Machiavelli wrote after The Prince, if you combine those two together, there's some great stratagem in there that I think could be applied to counterterrorism today, but we just don't apply it. And again, I have some of my notes, and I'll be publishing that in the next couple of days. But I just at least wanted to provide that follow-up of what's coming down the pipeline. A lot more on intellectual humility based on, yes, I even had a student at one of the conferences when we were talking about truth and fact. And I say that they're two very distinctive ideas. I mean, facts are facts. Facts are looked at as empirical. You can go down to black and white, down to the letter, and show somebody the scientific evidence. Where we say 8 out of 10 doctors recommend this toothpaste. Because you could line up 10 dentists and ask, do you recommend or not? Yes, 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 yes. No, no. Okay, there you go. 8 out of 10 said no. That's empirical. I know I'm kind of dumbing it down, right? And yet truth, when we talk about truth, is it objective truth or subjective truth? Well, it's both. Your truth is your truth. You're going to say this is true based on what you have read, you feel, and this is where your own confirmation bias comes in. And if you're not doing your own metacognition for yourself, then obviously you're not really, and you're not really thinking. Same thing with understanding our own fallacies when we start argumentation. So these are, and the student in the end, after I tried to explain, they're like, well, you're saying it's subjective. Well, yes, but truth is also objective. But truth does not mean fact. It cannot, and it will not. And this student, then his advisor, who is a PhD, sat next to them, shaking his head at me. And I'm like, okay, well, then you explain, what am I missing here? I turn the table to say, then I've given it to you in my books, in my research, in my writings. I've put it down. And now you're wanting to argue, which is correct. And well, truth is truth, is what the advisor whispered to him. And then truth is truth. And I had to laugh. And I think I actually have it on video because people took video. Oh, it was on IAFI's website. They actually filmed. You can catch for the most part. I even penned an article a week after the conference and sent it to, of course, I knew who the student was. The student came up later and didn't want to talk about, I said, well, did I misunderstand what you were trying to get at? You tell me what didn't make sense, because truth and fact are very, very different. They are not synonymous. Never use them as well. It's, the matter of the fact or the truth, the fact of the truth. When people say that, no, the fact of it, that doesn't make any sense in the English terms. So, they didn't want to talk about that. So I just, you know what? Here's my card. If you want to pick up a copy of my book, I didn't have any other copies with me. I handed them all out. And then there was a raffle and people picked up, I think I had 4 or 5 copies out there. And so looking back, then I was like, well, he never reached out to me within days after the conference. So I penned an article and I tagged IAFI for it, to be able to say this is what fact and truth differ. And then within truth, the subjective and objective. And that's the same with a lot of my writings, is that you'll notice they're 2 or 3 minute reads. Like I said, I will sit here, I will read, I will research. I have my agentic AIs going, and I want you all to do the same thing, because I can't learn fast enough. I'm not here to make money. I'm at that point. I've retired like 3 times over now. So pensions, they're fine. But I'm at a point in my life where I get to actually sit back and think. I worked until like 1:30 in the morning this morning, from about 7:30, 8 o'clock last night. Getting my ideas, doing some research, putting together ideas, outlines, and then where to go. And so stay tuned for that. I think under my Substack, I've got something like 10 or 11 drafts. Again, these follow my same format. I try to put practical applications. I try to put, a lot of this stuff out there. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Yeah. The personalities are everywhere, and I'm okay with that from a personal standpoint. But from our standpoint as intellectuals, as scholars, as educators, as coaches, we can't tolerate it. we accept it or tolerate, whichever word you want to plug in there. We should always want more from not only one another. And that's why I love collaboration. But I've put it out a lot to my doctoral students, my graduate students, undergrad, as well as to my LinkedIn community. Hey, if anybody who ever wants to collaborate, they don't. Why? I don't know. It's we do have to stand our ground, and that's my passion is just that. I have the passion. So, I know it's a little over, I've gone 5 minutes over where I wanted to. I want to, yes, it is very uncomfortable for some people. I think that some people feel very intimidated. I try not to come off intimidating. Again, I don't sit there and say, well, I know more than you. No, I don't, because you just never know. I see in all of your readings, each individual's within Substack and Medium. I learned so much from on topics that you write on that I'm like, wow, I didn't think about that. And so there are things that I myself I remind myself, like the Stoics, every day is a challenge, but it's how I face that challenge. I meet a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm a fan of the Stoics as well. I said, oh, what about the Cynics? um, you know, and they're like, the Cynics? And I'm like, oh, if you're going to read the Stoics, you got to read the Cynics. And that means you just got to open up your viewpoints because the Cynics aren't always negative. They do ask, again, the Stoics come off as here's how to face challenges or what you should do through a daily basis. And of course, Marcus Aurelius, the most prolific one, because he wrote his diaries down. Everybody else is, through whether, the founding father of the Stoics, Zeno, his writings were through, of course, pupils, and same thing with Seneca and Cicero. We didn't get a lot of their writings in original form. Marcus Aurelius, we did. We got a large part of his writings intact. And so when we look at, but the Cynics, very little, and yet they're out there. They're not always negative. They have that oppositional, the contrarian viewpoint. And just because we say oppositional doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Sometimes people say, well, but isn't that part of brainstorming? Isn't that part of devil advocacy, and critical thinking? Using ACH and the other structured analytical techniques to strip away or mitigate bias. So, okay. I know a lot for me to talk about. I'm going to do these more often. I'm going to try to do these more often. I appreciate you all. Again, I'm going to put it out there to all of you who've attended, as well as, any of my subscribers, non-subscribers, friend of a friend, tell somebody. If anybody ever wants to collaborate on an article, whether it is for Substack, Medium, or even a journal, please let me know, or even a book. Please let me know. I love it. And I'm not going to stop anytime soon, because I enjoy, after I get done reading, like, yes, my writing is very formal. Because I am an academic and I'm a prior intelligence analyst, so I don't sugarcoat stuff. So, with that, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you all. Have a great day and a great rest of your weekend. You all take care. Bye.